quick intro of Venkat. He's scrolling down to his intro. Yeah, now you can see it on the screen. Quick recap. He currently serves as the managing director of higher ed at Wipro, or Wipro, I think you say it. And he has 25 years of experience in strategy, technology, and operations in education. It's another higher ed veteran here. His areas of interest are higher ed management, student retention, and digital technology solutions for the connected student experience. Prior to Wipro, he led Cognizant's movement into higher ed and also managed NIT's Enterprise Learning Technology and Services business for education and publishing in both the US and Europe. So thanks again, Venkat, for joining us. I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much for having me here. Excited to be part of this. I've been following every speaker since yesterday, and very thought-provoking conversations. I really appreciate Matt and John and the rest of the team for inviting me to share my thoughts. I'm not going to speak much about what COVID has done and the challenges they've imposed and the opportunities they've created. I think a lot of people have already touched upon those areas. So I want to sort of shift the gear and talk a little about what happens next. How do institutions emerge smarter and stronger from this crisis? And how do we leverage technology to bring the real value of higher education in the post-pandemic world? I've always been fascinated with data and using data to solve problems, data-driven approaches to solve problems. And very early on, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, I started dabbling with student data with respect to retention. Built an early warning system to predict when student would drop out of the school, and that kind of led me to continue using data, and today I'm happy that I'm involved in 3 or 4 very key major research areas with respect to data, AI, and automation. One of them being intelligent institutions, the future of enrollment, which is how do we create smart enrollment process, and we'll talk more about that in this session. But outside of that, there are a couple of other areas that I'm happy to speak about. One is how do you automate financial aid, which has been a hot topic this morning with Steve talking a lot about that aspect. And also, how do we automate real-time interactions and create AI-driven content interventions or learning interventions in a remote setting? I think that is another exciting area that I want to, I will be sharing my thoughts and insights in the days to come. Right. So I want to start this session with a standard story of admissions. Imagine a school in the Northeast corridor with 30,000 students, diverse portfolio of programs, very big focus on research, industry partnerships. It's a global campus with both domestic and significant number of international students. When we looked at their data, they had 62,000 applications with about 11,000 and odd acceptances, of which 2,996 or approximately 3,000 students actually enrolled into the school in a given year. And to do this, they were running a staff of 200 admissions, recruitment specialists, enrollment specialists, and some of the folks that deal with enrollment systems and admission systems. The acceptance rate was 18.1. They were approximately spending 15 minutes on each application, but that times the number of applications and the number of people, there's an enormous amount of effort going into finding the ideal student that they want to recruit and enroll and have them complete from their institution. On the right-hand side, you see another representation of the same funnel. This is actually a picture, a report, a dashboard from one of the software that people use for enrollment management. So when you start looking at how the funnel narrows, going from 20,000 prospects to typically enrolling about, few more than 800 students. So at every stage of the funnel, we are losing more than 50% of the population in the previous stage. And I think this is a great problem situation to solve. And we saw this problem come to light with COVID, especially the current fall 2020 semesters that began had almost 20% lower enrollments than any other semesters. Of course, we know why. A lot of international students did not continue or did not, go through with their enrollment. Several students opted for gap years, and many different things institutions had to do to make sure that they had a sizable enrollment pool. um, the other challenge that it posed was that 1,600 schools decided not to use SAT scores for their admission criteria. Now, if I don't have a standardized test criteria or admission criteria, then I'm now more challenged. The process has become much more harder for me to select and offer the admission to the right candidate that would align with the university mission, goals, and all of our processes. So the challenge was this process is incredibly inefficient. It's expensive. Universities recruit far and wide to expand their pool of applicants in the hope of finding the perfect student. So how do we use data? How do we use AI? And how do we use some of the new technologies to help solve this problem? So I want you to sort of envision what's going to happen in the future. What I want to prescribe is an environment where we take a holistic view to admissions. Right? We all know what COVID did to the current admission cycle. If you all have read Jeff Salinger's book on Who Gets In, one of the key takeaways I had from the book was $10 million are spent on recruitment marketing in this country. And then students are always having different combinations about the colleges they want to get into. They have first choices, second choices, and then, a few more that they apply to. Colleges are also going through this complex process of deciding which students actually make up the grade, make up the criteria, and then also looking at all the non-scorable, non-objective criteria, personalities, essays, and other areas that all determine how we get enrolled into a school. So if you take all of this, can I get a holistic view of admissions where every aspect of the student is considered? And this is considered using data-driven approach and bringing in an unbiased view or reducing the bias. And then as an institution, how do we think smart and answer the following questions? Can I increase the number of applicants and acceptances without compromising on the quality of the process? At the same time, I want to lower the cost of my enrollment process. How do I broaden the funnel? Not necessarily broaden the top part of the funnel, because we end up doing that. We add more marketing, more dollars, more more markets, and we end up creating broadening the top part of the funnel in the hopes that the bottom part will also widen. But if I can combine process efficiency, balance quality, and the quantity of the output, that way, if I even make a small change in the number of acceptances and therefore the number of enrolled students, it's going to be a huge impact to the top line for the institution. So with that context, I want you all to stay with me for the next 5 minutes and think about what a smart enrollment framework would look like. This is taking all the inputs like test scores or application documents, additional inputs that you collect for admissions, and putting it through an AI/automation/data science framework. So you capture the data, ingest the data into the framework, classify and segment all the documents. You extract relevant information from all the text and the content that you have ingested. You apply some pattern-based predictions, you apply some machine learning rules, adaptations, and score a lot of these criteria that you want to evaluate this application on, and then present those scores as part of a dashboard. On the other end, you're underneath this framework, you're using text mining, natural language processing, machine learning, deep learning, and all of this is using the existing empirical data that institutions already have about the students. So you have maybe 5, 10, 15, in some cases 50 years of data that's already available with institutions. Using all of that, you can create pattern-based prediction. You can create scoring and flags of the ideal student that you want to admit, and use all of that and present as a recommendation. It does not take away the human aspect of admissions, and these recommendations then are intervened to the admissions office, and they can review, they can correct, they can change and edit, and then go ahead with the process to accept or deny that application. Right? So this is something that I think is going to be very relevant in the fall of 2021 as institutions decide. Many institutions will continue not to use SAT scores or ACT. They will continue to look for broadening the funnel. They'll continue to measure students beyond the objective measures. And so we'll start to think of ways of how we can automate, how do we bring the knowledge of current data into the new process, and how do we find that ideal student so that I can increase the number of acceptances. Right? I want to just quickly show you a few dashboards that are possible. These are all envisioned as the output of this process. This process is in the making right now. You can look at statistics. You can look at student types. You can look at GPA scores and course credits. These are standard dashboards that every one of you have seen and you have probably used in order to make a determination. But I think what's going to happen with the new process is how you will get new dashboards that increase the transparency of the admission process, that reduce the bias, that are strongly data-driven, with minimal human oversight, with a focus on process-driven approach, using AI to identify the ideal student which embodies the university's value and mission. So some of the new things that AI will be able to bring into the admission enrollment process would be things like what are the values? What are the student values that align with the university values and missions? So in terms of enrollment, in terms of retention, in terms of fitment, will this student be an alumni that I desire in the future? And what kind of an influence as an alumni the student will have? We can also take into account all the recommendations made for the student, whether by their schools, by companies that they may have interned at. What is the expectancy of completion? What is the expectancy of value the student can bring to the school? All of these measures can be now created in order to get a very holistic view of who are you admitting and how that student is going to impact the future of your institution. So what is the call to action? I think if you go back right now to the enrollment process, to the admissions process, I think there's tremendous chance to incrementally make your admission process smarter. And this doesn't have to be the entire future vision that I presented, but even incrementally, where are the ways in which I can remove inefficiency? So there's a three-step approach that I have been talking about. One is simplify the process. Can I just look at the process of admission and see where do I simplify it? How do I remove the inefficiencies from it? That's the first step, so that I can make, as a process, I can make it more faster, more economical, and better than before. The second step is analytics. So if I have data that I've been capturing over the years, can I use data science to make some predictive models that will allow me to compare current application data to those models and see where this current student falls and how this current student fares, whether they are on the mark, above the mark, below the mark. A lot of that can be done very quickly. And then finally, you automate. So after you've done the predictive modeling, then you can take some of that process and say, okay, how do I bring in automation and how do I innovate? Where can I automatically make some decisions happen based on rules, based on prior data, based on some of the aspects that you've seen in the AI-driven landscape. So those three will then give me an opportunity to take what I am doing today and move it into a very, very futuristic, smart enrollment process, and overall making the institution very intelligent in selecting and retaining their students. Now, as I said in the beginning, this is just one aspect of how to use AI with enrollment. I think similar cases or use cases can be applied to student retention. It can be applied to automating some of the financial aid inefficiencies. You could also look at using AI to deal with a lot of the remote learning. A very unique thought that I've been pursuing over the last few weeks is, we've all had Zoom sessions and Zoom conferences, and everybody's on Zoom every day now. But what if I could attend a class and then be able to get a summary of the video with my notes and my assignments from the class automatically delivered to my inbox as soon as I, click on leave meeting, right? This is a kind of smart remote learning session could be achieved driving some of these AI techniques. So let me pause there. I think I've taken 10, 15 minutes of the time, and would rather have a more interactive discussion talking about some of these thoughts that I just presented.
Thank you, Venkat. That was very helpful. Some great suggestions. One of the things I couldn't agree more that there's so much potential for automation, that there's much of higher ed is inherently inefficient because we're doing very manual things that we've been doing for a long time and hasn't changed. I think in particular enrollment, one of your suggestions about measuring qualities that aren't normally quantifiable, right? I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And I wondered if you had any suggestions about how to optimize things like extracurriculars and essays. Those are normally one of the biggest time-consuming pieces of the admissions process. Any thoughts on those not quantifiable things? And a reminder to the audience for answers, please submit your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom. I don't have questions yet. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, David. That's a wonderful question. And, it's the most difficult part of automation is non-quantifiable behaviors. So there are several ways to do that. And I think we can take a page from several social media apps. And, a great example is TikTok. The moment you start watching things that interest you, and then, you sort of, after 2 hours, you realize you've seen so many different 15-second videos of the same subject that, They know more about what you want to see, and things like that. And for every 15-second video that you watch, TikTok is gathering 115 points about the viewer, about the audience that is currently on that particular piece of video, and then turning that into algorithms and predicting, what you want to see next. So if I just have to take that page, drop it into admissions, I think schools have data about the previous alumni and the students and their careers and what they are going, where they have gone, what they do today. A lot of that information can come back into the school, and they can track that information, they can capture that information and find what were the personality traits, what were the characteristics that these successful students had. And so how do I look for those characteristics in the incoming student? And the way you will match those characteristics are by having personality surveys, personality questions, which have always been used, whether it's for adult learning theories or for finding out the kind of a learner you are, or for finding out a temperamental score. So a lot of this psychological science exists. It's just that putting that into a form that can turn that into data, and then the key is building those algorithms with that data, and that will depend on how much empirical data you have to mine and create that composite score. And given all that, again, I'm saying it's an art of finding out how good, finding out a personality characteristic, or we are trying to turn that art into a science, and you cannot do that without having that human intervention. Therefore, I would never say, this can do it as good as how a counselor would actually do it. But having done it 80% of the way, if the counselor can weigh in and say, yes, this is correct, I would love to go with this, then that makes the system sort of workable to the extent, and also economically feasible. You don't want a 100% AI-driven system.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I really like a lot of your discussion. When I think about AI and machine learning, right, and any of the automations that we would look at, to make a world smart or campus smart, I look at it in two ways, right? And David and JTH know this because I kind of breathe this all the time to them. We got to look at our activities on a campus in either two ways. Is it structured or unstructured? If it's structured, it means there is rules, there is sequentialness, there is like things that we know are black and white. Those are structured activities. That means I can have a machine or an AI take those rules and create it, right? So that's the structured element. So and we do something called HTV here at Beyond, where we're now understanding what are the structured activities, because every time we can identify things as being structured, they're a candidate for AI, machine learning, automation, everything else, right? Anything that we recognize as being unstructured, things that require cognitive reasoning, cognitive thinking, body language, all the things that a machine and things that I can't put a black and white rule in place, it means I need a human to do that activity, right? And this is where I think schools have to get to, because right now, every time I have a discussion with a school about AI or machine learning, and I usually don't drive it that way, I always ask the question, what are you doing that's so structured that it doesn't require a human to do it? That's when we start to really take it. And if the more structured things we do, the more AI we do, and the more ML we do, and the more automation we do, the more data we're going to actually get, right? And so if we can learn to do that on a campus, I would love your take on that concept of identifying it, and then how do we then do a roadmap on those things, and then we will then get greater capacity of the humans that are doing structured work, and they're now going to go do unstructured work.
That's very well put, Matt. I think you were right on target. And as I said, I want to go back to what I said in my presentation. 3 steps. First of all, simplify the process. You may be running a complex process with too many handoffs. Once you simplify, look at what you talk about, structured and unstructured. The structured pieces can be driven based on data. Some decisions can be automatically made. You don't have to have human intervention. And then for the unstructured parts, you can still use modeling to create certain scores and have the human intervene and select or deny that recommendation.
Got it.
Right? So those are the 3 steps. So you don't, when you say AI, I don't want everything to look like Star Wars or things happen automatically. It's not going to be there like that. But we can start with small steps, like simplifying the process, for instance, or modeling some of my criteria, rule-based criteria, using existing data, and then seeing which parts can be automatically done. And there are tools available. There are multiple open source and APIs that can scan, they can read, they can be intelligent. There are things that Google and folks like that put out that can be used to parse through things. So there's a lot of that available, but I think having that vision of where I want to push my enrollment process to be more efficient, more smarter than today, in all aspects, in decision making, in economic sense, and in the quality of the process.
Venkat, there's 2 questions out there, and I know we're at the bottom of the hour, and I want to respect people who came to watch the session. We are going to have an open mic right after this. So Venkat, I hope you can maybe stay and maybe interact during that open mic. But Lindsay asked the question, how would you structure the team? And then also, what competency of skill sets to understand the metadata used to do this kind of data and analytics?
So my first, let me answer the second part of the question. The metadata part of the question, there's a lot of data science that has to be used. That is where you can leverage what you have as institutional research. IR teams within the universities always were looking at this data. They're always classified. They may already have a taxonomy. That's your starting point, where you can start to categorize, have metadata, start understanding what data that you have. And then when you start to make use of the data in your process, you will start to see that the teams change. I mean, I think your first question was, what kind of teams do you see? So the entire admissions process will drive what kind of people who are running that process now. So it may be more student-centric, more high touch with the student, but less doing all of the scanning of your essays or looking through your documents or going through the motions of the different systems where I need to put in data. I think a lot of that will change. So I don't know exactly what type of people you'll have or who will it be, but it's going to be a very high interactive, high touch admissions contact rather than the 200 people that we have on a team of a large private institution or a public institution. Does that make sense?
So let's end the session.
Yep.
I want to table this discussion on talent because I think team is about talent a little bit. So David, I'm going to let you conclude, and then let's hand it over, and then I'm going to invite the other guests to join the stage. And then Karen, I saw your question. I know you're going to stay, so I'm going to ask the question to Venkat in that session, okay?
Great, perfect. Yeah, thanks again, Venkat, for this talk. We appreciate it. And we'll turn it back over to Matt for open mic. Thanks.